Today we're going to be watching the idiot celebrities exposed by Ricky Gervais. If there's one thing on earth I love doing is just dumping on Hollywood. Hollywood is full of a bunch of out of touch people who think they're important but are really irrelevant to everything that goes on in this world. They just entertain us. A lot of them are born into it, and a lot of them have no idea what it's like. And I don't know if you've seen what Ricky Gervais did that one night. I think, was it at the Golden Globes? I'm not sure which one it was, but he just tore into them. But yeah, Hollywood needs to rein in their egos a bit.
If there's one man who's shown he can rise above the dirt and grime of Hollywood, it's Ricky Gervais. Coming from virtually nothing, he built a career spanning multiple award-winning stand-up specials and movies. But that wasn't all. He co-created one of the most acclaimed sitcoms of all time, The Office, the remake of which became the most popular sitcom of all time.
I think the US
It's made
is
all
still
the
better.
more remarkable by the fact that most of Hollywood absolutely hates his guts. But despite multiple attempts to cancel him, and despite Ricky exposing the hypocrisy to the world at their own award events.
The thing about like what's different is like Ricky Gervais is a comedian. A lot of comedians have to like really grind to even get recognized. And so they come from a like more of a hardworking background than anyone else in Hollywood really does. And so he definitely understands like how people, you know, how like working class kind of is. I mean, I know there are some comedians that kind of get born into it, but they're the one, like no one really even remembers them because like being funny is a gift. And so if you're not funny, then like you're not going to be remembered for being born into something.
His career is still going strong.
But I did see the one clip that somebody put on the internet about him saying, don't virtue signal, just come out here and get your little prize, go fuck off, because nobody cares about your opinion. I was like, thank you. Thank you, Ricky.
So let's see how Ricky Gervais exposed the disgusting industry that is Hollywood. Now, Ricky Gervais is probably the last person you'd expect to find fame. He was certainly never searching for it himself. He was born in 1961 in Reading, England, to a working class family living in a council estate, which is a kind of British social housing. For the first 30 years, Ricky Gervais lived a completely ordinary life. He went through school and then university like anyone else, switching his course from biology to philosophy because it took far less time. He was even in a band, although their first record only ever got popular in the Philippines years after the band broke up. After university, Ricky moved with his girlfriend to a tiny one-bedroom flat, working odd jobs and hovering on the fringes of show business.
In the early days, obviously, separate nothing. In fact, we lived in one room for like the first 6 years. I mean, it was tiny. It was a bed.
It's funny, like if you look at them, how were they? But it's like, oh yeah, oh tiny bed. I've never experienced that. They like it's like they just don't understand what it's like.
Seriously, there was a fridge, a cooker, and a sink. Could I door, obviously.
But yeah,
in bed, right? I could open the fridge door.
Yeah.
Seriously, there was a fridge, a cooker, and a sink. Yeah. There wasn't even a bathroom. That was shared with the other rooms.
It was this time in the
it's
real
like a studio.
that cemented Ricky Gervais's humor and common sense.
Like
it
a
gave
really
him a
small
knowledge and
one.
understanding of real people's lives that most of the nepo babies in Hollywood will never understand. The ego and self-importance that flows through Hollywood was never a problem for him because everything was...
Any Kardashian like doing any sort of physical labor to them is like, oh, I'm helping everyone out. I look at me. Oh my, I'm using my hands. Wow.
handed to him.
Just don't
Ricky would
even-
bring his real life knowledge
don't even
and
record
experience to
yourself
his
doing that
comedy
stuff.
in a way that few
Come
have
on.
been able to replicate. But most of all, it was his understanding of normal people and the characters you meet that sealed his rise to fame. While Ricky Gervais became a household name off the back of The Office, it wasn't where his career began. Instead, The Office and the idea for it came from a radio show Ricky was involved in a few years before. It was while working there that he met Stephen Merchant, and the two
The
immediately
Office
sparked a
is
friendship.
such a great
Now, the radio
show. If
show
you
would get
haven't seen
cancelled
it,
only a
you
year
gotta
after it
watch it.
started,
It's so
but that didn't
funny.
matter.
I like the
It was
US
the
version
connections that he
a
made
lot
that were
better.
important. It led Ricky to getting on panel shows
US
and other
humor a little
radio
bit better than
shows, slowly
British.
building connections in the industry. A couple years later, and Ricky and Stephen had built enough recognition to get noticed. So they set out to make the pilot for their own show, a satirical mockumentary following a set of office workers. And this was where Ricky's character of David Brent came to life. And in the digital age, where our personal information feels more like public property,
here
it's
comes
allowed me
the
to see
ad.
just how accessible our data is to predators and data brokers. That's why I want to tell you about our video sponsor, Aura. You see, data brokers sell your information to anyone interested, scammers, spammers, you name it.
Yeah, companies
Your full
exploit
name,
you
email,
on
home
any
address, health
any
records,
sort of
even
website. They
details
don't
about your
care.
relatives.
Nothing
It's
is
all
private
out
anymore.
there.
It sucks.
That's why I've turned to Aura. Aura meticulously scans for data brokers
I try to
peddling
keep my
information
stuff as
and
private
steps
as I
in to
can.
automatically submit
They-
opt-out
I don't want
requests
any
on
of
my
these companies
behalf.
making
Imagine logging
any more
into
money
Aura
than they
and finding
already
out
do off
just
of
how
me.
many brokers are exploiting your personal information. But here's the kicker:
It's like,
cleaning up my digital
well,
footprint
the kick
with
to
Aura does
use their
more than just cut
website
down
is
on the
that
annoying
they
spam.
sell
It's a crucial
you,
step in
essentially.
safeguarding my accounts, from social media to banking, against hackers who could exploit
yeah,
this
you
freely
are the
available
product.
information. I don't know if you saw this, but AT&T revealed that over 72 million customer records, both existing and former
Nice.
customers, were released
They're on
on the
par
dark
with
web.
Sony.
They recommended those affected
gonna
use
win it?
strong passwords, monitor account activity, and consider credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Well, Aura does all of this for me. And best of all, I don't have to download several different apps just because the company couldn't keep my data secure. If my info was compromised in
Nice.
the AT&T data breach,
This is
I wouldn't
actually not a
worry,
bad
because
app.
Aura is always on, always doing the hard work of keeping me safe. So make sure to check out aura.com/me.
check it
Link
out.
in the description to start your 2-week free trial.
Get the man paid.
Now, for those of you who haven't seen the show, the character is the walking embodiment of self-importance and confidence masking insecurity. It's a masterful depiction of a character that we've all probably met before, made all the much better by the small detail.
That's the beauty of The Office. Like, every single one of those people in there is like totally relatable because everybody has been in a work environment where you have like the kiss ass, you have the like the super awkward person who doesn't know like social boundaries, like Michael Scott was in the U.S. Office, and like you have you have people like Kevin, you have all these types of people, and like regular people like Jim, who are like in love with someone there. We've all experienced that stuff. That's why that show is so funny and relatable.
That was Ricky added to the performance. The way he strokes his tie when he's proud, or effortlessly seems so oblivious to everyone else's embarrassment, shows it all comes from real life experience. David Brent makes it clear that from the beginning of his career, Ricky Gervais had a very clear understanding of how people use self-importance to create an illusion for themselves. David's drive for power, fame, and for everyone else to both like and respect him is barely under the surface. Both the audience and pretty much all of the characters around him can see it. It's the central character combined with the hilarious realism of the rest of the show, which makes The Office one of the best comedy shows of all time. It was something.
And what sucks is like nowadays you will never be able to get away with that. Comedy is dead because everybody gets so offended over the silliest stuff. It's insane. Like, you will never have a show like The Office again. There's nothing gonna be funny. And I always say like people, I hate, because I just use this, but I do hate when people say, oh, there'll never be insert comedy movie like that again, because like it just takes someone with the balls to do it and just not give a hell, like never give a fuck about it. And like, it's just, we need someone like that in Hollywood to just put it out there and not care at all what the hell anyone thinks about it. We'll see if that ever happens. If it does, I guarantee you that movie will make a ton of money, because people who get offended are like a small minority of, everyone out there. And for the most part, nobody gives a crap about like the jokes that are made. Like, everyone likes The Office. There's plenty of jokes in there that people can be offended by. And I'm sure there's articles out there about that and people trying to get it taken off of whatever streaming site it's on now. But like, at the end of the day, everybody knows that this show is great, and all the movies that were funny and edgy back then are great. And someone just needs to have the balls to come out and make a really good offensive movie, because it'll do really well, I bet.
Something that regular people were crying out for, but that the media establishment simply couldn't provide itself. Of course, with so many people watching and laughing, the awards soon piled in. The Office's success also gave Ricky Gervais's comedy career a jumpstart. His first special, called Animals, put him straight into the top tier of comedians in the world. The content of his stand-up was made up of the same brutal honesty that people had come to expect by now. If a joke was funny, Ricky didn't shy away from it. Whatever the subject, if there was laughter to be found, then he would pounce on it. It's the very essence of comedy that it needs to challenge your expectations situations, and often that involves tackling awkward subjects and offending people who can't take a joke. At the start of his career, this wasn't a problem, but over the past decade, we've
That's
seen
the
the
best thing to
pendulum
do is
shift,
offend
and now
people who can't
comedians
take
can
jokes.
easily get ostracized for one wrong statement. Ricky Gervais has been immune to that, mainly because his jokes are always just jokes. Often comedians land in trouble because their joke was bad and it spoke to a real prejudice they have. But it was never
That's such
like
a
that
shame
for
what they
Ricky
try to do
Gervais,
to Dave.
who was always just using the subject to make people laugh. He doesn't care if people get offended, so
No
the
one
attempts
cares,
to
though.
cancel him just
Again,
dissolve into nothing.
still
Hollywood and the
famous.
media world as a whole didn't have the experience that made Ricky Gervais so loved by audiences. So as his career grew, many were eager to secure his talents.
It was his time working on his stand-up comedy that was the most important for this. Ricky Gervais was naturally gifted, of course. The success of The Office meant that he could skip performing to small crowds for years
you
trying to
can't
get
fake
noticed.
comedy.
And he was able to go straight to his
impossible.
first special, which was met with widespread acclaim. Over the next decade, Ricky Gervais spent his time constantly working on and refining his comedy. He expanded on this process in a later interview with Backpage. You do it every night, and the audience is choosing the best bits. It's less of an art and more of a science. Now
To
I've
be
done
fair,
this
though,
show
I've
to
never watched Ricky
500,000
Gervais's
people. There's
comedy.
not an audience who understands English that won't laugh in the same place. I could give you the readout on a
I've
graph,
seen,
and
like,
it would
that
be exactly
Golden
the same.
Globe
It was
speech he
through
did,
this
which was
process that
awesome.
over the 20 years after The Office, Ricky Gervais
yeah,
came to understand
like,
what
he's
real people laugh at and what they're
definitely
interested in.
authentic,
That constant
though.
feedback and the need to stay in touch was something that Hollywood completely
I think I've
lacked.
seen one
His
special,
ordinary
actually.
background and viewpoint were exotic to them. It was this quality that got him booked so often for late night talk shows, comedy specials,
And I've seen him
and
on
it's
a lot
what
of late
eventually
night,
landed
too.
him his gig hosting the Golden Globes. Ricky Gervais hosted the awards ceremony 5 times in total,
Yeah, it was the
each
Golden
time
Globes.
bringing his own brand of honest and unapologetic humor. But by the time number 5 had rolled around, he was getting sick of it. When he started his
He's
career,
just-
most people he met didn't have
Ricky Gervais just goes in there and he's like, F it, I'm getting fired this year.
time
Screw
for
it.
his jokes at the expense of celebrities. But years of scandals and being exposed for their crimes had since hardened the general public.
Nothing is funnier watching these people who've never gotten shit talked get shit talked.
What made it worse was the constant virtue signaling and the fakeness of celebrities caring about causes of regular
Yeah,
people.
okay,
Ricky was
yeah.
no stranger to charitable work, of course. He's done more for animal rights than nearly anyone else in the spotlight. But it had become clear to nearly everyone that most celebrities were just using charity and activism as a way to look good to their celebrity peers.
Yeah.
It was a marketing tool to land them a better
Yeah.
movie.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if
The
you
cringiest
try.
thing I've ever
You see
seen
that
on the internet.
Imagine song that all those knuckleheads got together and sang? Imagine there's no heaven. This is not the time when everyone's Grammy's dying, you fucking idiot, to sing Imagine There's No Heaven.
And there's this sense of you feel like they feel
These people are in mansions, like big ass houses with maids and all the best entertainment in the world, and they're still and like they don't have to worry about jobs, and they still have to find a way for people to give them attention is insane. Like they can't go without attention for a single year, and they're out there singing on Instagram and TikTok.
like they did something
Yeah.
significant there.
She's
like,
so happy.
she's
Gal
like,
Gadot, whatever the fuck
"That's
her
what I
name is,
did
Wonder
for you."
Woman. She's got this beautiful smile on her face and so happy to sing that.
Thank you.
Just like she's seducing you.
Yeah, I lost my job at the meatpacking plant, but Gal Gadot sang Imagine.
And it's a
today.
terrible version. You guys suck at singing.
To get them in better positions of power. It was this hypocrisy piled on top
Yeah, you got people losing their jobs and they're freaking singing to you like everything's gonna be okay. Like before you're going to bed. It's insane. I hate that. Was so cringe.
of all the others that led to Ricky's infamous speech. Now, if you're one of the only people who hasn't seen it yet, you should really give it a watch. He was brutal, covering the abuse scandals, the funding from evil companies, Hollywood's problem with predators,
Yeah, he goes
Look,
through all of it.
Talking of all you perverts, it was a big year. It was a big year for paedophile movies. Seriously, most films are awful, lazy, remakes, sequels. I've heard a rumour that there might be a sequel to Sophie's Choice. I mean, that'd just be Meryl Streep going, well, it's got to be this one then.
the lack of ideas, the sequels, as well as a few personal roasts.
Spoiler alert, season 2 is on the way, so in the end, he obviously didn't kill himself. Just like Jeff Epstein. Shut up. I know he's your friend, but I don't care.
Every scandal of embarrassment for these people was there, and it all was covered in 8 short minutes. Ricky Gervais is perfectly set up to take down this kind of self-importance and ego. The ground
Destroys them. It's so funny anytime You like if you haven't seen it, you got to see it. But it's so funny every time like the camera cuts to some celebrity, they're like clearly offended. Except Adam Driver. Adam Driver's the only one who's actually like legit laughing at
Work
it.
was laid by the way that the office deconstructs set up to take down this kind of self-importance and ego. The groundwork was laid by the way that the office deconstructs David Brent's bravado and unearned self-confidence. That obliviousness to who everyone else sees you is exactly the same problem that Hollywood has. He knew that all of the people at home watching were the real audience. The people in the room getting the awards were only props. It's clear this was the right decision now. Nobody remembers who actually got the Golden Globes, whilst people...
I think I've always thought the Golden Globes and like the Oscars, all that kind of stuff is so weird because it's just people like essentially jerking each other off. It's so weird. Like it's just award ceremonies to celebrate yourself for working. It's so weird. I just don't
talk
get
about
it.
his monologue today. You can tell which of the actors and executives have bought into the Hollywood world of illusions by how they reacted to the joke. Lots of them, like Tom Hanks or Jonathan Pryce, took huge offense at his jokes, clearly taking themselves far too seriously.
He's like, what is that, Jonathan Pryce? He's like,
So Jonathan
he sits back and he's like, not a smile on his face, looking around to see if anyone else is upset.
Pryce took huge offense at his jokes, clearly taking themselves far too seriously as they shake their heads at Gervais's jokes. Others like DiCaprio were laughing along with us, even when they were right in the crosshairs. It shows that at least some people in Hollywood are capable of making a joke, but the majority are still hooked on political correctness. It's clearly a completely performative trend for them. As Ricky said in his speech, they'll happily overlook the abuses going on within Hollywood itself. But the second someone makes a joke or brings attention to these things, it's an inappropriate joke that's worthy of getting cancelled over.
A superb drama about the importance of dignity and doing the right thing, made by a company that runs sweatshops in China. So, well, you
Facts.
say you're woke, but the companies you work for, I mean, unbelievable. Apple, Amazon, Disney. If ISIS started a streaming service, you'd call your agent, wouldn't you? So
It comes from a desire to be famous.
That is so true. Like all these companies that now, like companies that are notorious for like child labor and exporting labor overseas, like Apple, are now streaming. And then you have these actors on these companies' websites and streaming platforms that try to preach the total opposite and do absolutely nothing to speak up against their company they're working for to actually make a change but they're out here getting awards for it and they're not saying anything. And they'll say stuff like that's wrong outside the company and on what's wrong with this country and stuff, but they never address like the actual problems the company that they work for is perpetrating throughout society.
Famous and relevant to stay afloat in the constant maelstrom of Hollywood. They need to keep their reputations intact because they all depend on each other for their multi-million-dollar contracts and place within the industry. Ricky Gervais, who's been in the business for years but is still an outsider to the establishment, is perfectly placed to make fun of all of this. He's already proven himself.
Well, it's because he's self-made, so like people will go and see his shows no matter what, because all he has to do is show up at a club and ask to, perform, and they're gonna let him. As well, like Hollywood, if you want to get, an acting role, people have to like you. You have to subscribe to certain ideologies and all that kind of stuff. And if you go against the line, they'll blacklist you. They won't let you in a movie. So you have to act a certain way and be a certain type of person in order to get these roles. So comedy is a little bit different. You could be a little bit more self-made with comedy and you're a little more interesting, you're funny, so you could really like go out onto the internet and kind of branch out and be your own person. So like a lot of comedians kind of stand to the outside of the establishment of Hollywood.
That his creative projects don't depend on their approval. It makes him untouchable and completely unwilling to engage in the delusion they've all bought into.
We've seen how delicate Hollywood personalities can get over a single
That was
joke.
so crazy.
The Oscars have shown us that, so seeing them all having to grin and take it is the best gift the Golden Globes could have given us. Ricky Gervais's previous stand-up shows and jokes had already gotten him on Hollywood's cancel radar. In 2018, 2 years before, Gervais was criticized for making fun of Caitlyn Jenner.
she didn't do a lot for women drivers.
Ricky Gervais, who poked fun at the reality star during his Golden Globes monologue. Caitlyn responded saying, quote, "I think what I'm going to do is call the Golden Globes and see if they need a new host for next year. We'll solve that problem."
It speaks to Hollywood's hypocrisy that they were perfectly happy overlooking her accident, which ended in tragedy. While they settled out of court,
I can't
the LA
believe she
Sheriff's
got away with
Office
that.
wanted
That's
charges
crazy.
for vehicular manslaughter, but because for a very brief time,
Any normal person would be going to prison for that. But because she's popular, she's in Hollywood, and she has other attributes that keep her from going to prison, that it's just the prime example of Hollywood privilege right there, and how there is a class system, and how people who aren't popular, famous, or rich get ran over by the system.
she was an idol of Hollywood, Gervais was seen as the one in the wrong. In 2019, just a year before the speech, Gervais again came under fire for jokes he made over Twitter. It's almost a requirement for modern comedians to get caught up in the 24-hour outrage cycle that never stops on the platform. But his Golden Globe speech was the icing on the cake for a lot of them. Ever since, various activist groups have tried to cancel him over the jokes he makes. In 2022, the US LGBT rights group GLAAD took aim at him, saying that his most recent Netflix comedy special should be pulled from the platform. Because of some jokes he was making, the media ate this up like clockwork.
He's a
There's
comedian,
tons of
you
articles written
dummies.
at the time talking about how awful his comments were, but not a lot of actual people talking about it. The lack of popular support
because
is
no one
clear, and
cares.
It's much more likely to be yet another jab from Hollywood's elite. As Gervais said in a statement, these people are virtue signaling. They're basically saying that minorities don't have a sense of humor, which is so patronizing. These groups that people barely hear of make these statements speaking for the entirety of the group they represent, when really they're only speaking for a tiny group of people. Other than the articles getting published,
Yeah, it's always the minority group of people who are offended. That's like what I was saying about the comedy movie type deals, is like you're going to have probably less than 1% of anyone who watches that actually get offended. Most people don't care, and they're just super loud about how offended they are. And they the reason why it seems like it's like everybody's offended is just because you have maybe 100 people legit offended, and they're nonstop pouring their tweets out and posting about it because they're so mad, when really it's not a lot of people.
and the wave of Twitter outrage, nothing ever happens. It's a tactic to silence people, which has stopped working. If they can get Gervais on this, then it will damage his credibility. Really though, Gervais and the other comedians who are threatened with cancellation are just doing their job. They need to challenge the boundaries and broach controversial topics. At this point, comedy is the only voice on these subjects that hasn't been stripped of microaggressions and wrongthink. At least
That's what I was gonna say, is comedy is the last frontier of this kind of stuff, and you'll know if freedom of speech is truly dead if comedy dies. It has died in Hollywood, I would say, but in the grand scheme of relevant culture, it's definitely not. It's just moved towards the internet more, and it's thriving on the internet. People still love comedy. No one's really being censored too much with comedy, which is great. But I also think now in 2024, being canceled doesn't work anymore. I think most people don't care, and they're going to stick to whoever they like, even if they're canceled or not. Because you cultivate an audience, and I think that audience definitely can judge for themselves if someone's actually guilty of something horrendous or not. And yeah, I don't think canceling really works anymore, except maybe in super extreme cases. But over certain words or tweets, I don't think it's as big deal as it used to be.
for now, companies
Which
are
is good.
generally unwilling to cancel people over a few jokes. Netflix, in response to both Gervais's joke and Dave Chappelle's special, released an internal statement in support of them. And even more surprisingly, they said that any of their employees who can't deal with offensive jokes might need a new job. The specter of cancellation that runs through all of this really isn't that threatening anymore anyway. Unless someone does something truly nasty or criminal, they can only
That
get
was
cancelled
crazy.
by playing into the outrage and releasing some long, cringy apology video. If people get offended over some joke they make, they can just ignore it. Without fuel, the fire will die out.
Oh yeah, isn't that guy who he made a joke, I think, about sexual assault, but it's a joke, okay? So he doesn't mean it. But yeah, and he linked that to he linked the people who were offended by that to like special needs helmets, like the ones special needs people wear. He's like, here's a link to my like apology video or something like that, and it was a link to special needs helmets.
Now, this doesn't happen when people do something actually harmful. It's hard for people to forget that. But when barely anyone except some Hollywood elites care about something in the first place, it's easily forgotten. It shows that it's never been about the cause they're suddenly the champions of. The people calling out comedians for telling jokes know their audiences won't care. It only serves to make them look better, at least in their own minds. But in reality, it just shows how accurate Ricky Gervais' speech was and still is today.
Nice. Good video, good video. Yeah, so Hollywood is a long story short, Hollywood's I guess a bunch of crybabies, you know. Ricky Gervais is saving the day, apparently. But no. Yeah. The day comedy dies is the day freedom of speech dies. So luckily that's not happening. So we're good for now. We're still good. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of the video. I like it a lot. And yeah, drop your comments below. Like and subscribe. I could use it. This is like my second video. Yeah, and hopefully the quality is a little bit better now because I adjusted the audio levels on this one. And the screen hopefully is full screen now. Thanks for what you guys watching. I appreciate it. Adios.